What's going on, everyone? My name's Sweaty Zeus, and this will be my review for 2023's The Lords of the Fallen. Lords of the Fallen is a kind of remake, re-release, I don't know what you call it, slash sequel, but pretty much in name only. It sounds like the studio's been completely rebuilt from the ground up from the 2014 release of Lords of the Fallen, which shared the name. And I think that game was actually one of the first ever Souls-likes, or attempts at replicating what FromSoft's done with the Dark Souls series and creating a whole new template of gaming. And it's turned into its own genre at this point. So I'm always excited to see a new attempt. Although most of them have been pretty hit or miss, other than like Liza P recently. But I've been seeing this game's been getting a lot of hate from people, so I really wanted to make a review for this one and let you know what I think. So let's get started. Yeah. Lords of the Fallen uses Unreal Engine 5, which I think is one of the first games to make release that does so. A lot of games are still using Unreal 4. And I think that led to some of the performance issues. It's just not being optimized yet. But in some of the marketing, they talked about how that Unreal 5 allowed them to have sliders for like character creation. It allows your clothing to fit like different body styles and things. So you have these sliders where you can slide between different preset heads or preset bodies. So you can make a guy super fat or a girl super fat or super thin or whatever you want to do. I wish there was a little more body customization, like breast size. Not like in a pervy way, but just to be able to create a little more diverse looking character sets, or the ability to change height, head size, things like that. More like Cyberpunk. I still think that's kind of the better one. But this is definitely one of the best ones I've ever seen in a Souls-like, or definitely any action RPG type game. And you can definitely make your character look like you, menacing or goofy if you want to. So it's pretty good. One thing I was really impressed with in Lords of the Fallen was the amount of detail. When you're looking at armor or level design or any intricate designs you see throughout the world, even places like on statues and things like callbacks and hints, and you get a lot of that lore built into the world that you see with like Souls games. um, and then you have different factions, they have different weapon designs, you can see like their personality built into the weapons, where there's the Radiant faction, which is like the kind of militant church, and everything's made out of gold and luxurious. And then there's the Rogar, which are like the demonic group, and their weapons are made out of like like look like they're crudely made, or they have like body parts welded in them, or like fingers dangling off of them and stuff like that. And then you got Umbral, which is like kind of like a, I don't know what it is. It's like a dead world, like alternate reality where everything's dead, and there's like fungus growing on stuff and eyeballs everywhere. But like it's incorporated even in like the armor of enemies, and the weapons and things like that. They all look like organic, um, where they look like they'll be made out of some large creature or something, or they almost have like muscle and tissue on them. So there's a lot of depth and care and design and everything in the world, and just overall the art design was top notch. And one thing I really liked is, although you could tell like the designers and developers of this game, like they had huge inspiration from Dark Souls, and they admitted that in interviews and even in some marketing material I saw. Like they said they were, FromSoft was moving on to Elden Ring and doing something new, and we almost wanted to make like a Dark Souls 4. As one interview I saw, or like a spiritual Dark Souls 4, or he also called it like Hyper Souls, was another description of the game, like early on. And although like you see those like callbacks and like inspirations, with all the stuff I said, they did like a great job of making it their own, and it has their own feel to it. None of it feels like it feels inspired, but it also feels very much their own, and like you can tell there was a ton of care and thought put into everything, and it doesn't feel like a blatant like copy cash grab type thing. Like it's every enemy and weapon and armor in the world has, you
Apologies,
know,
but
a ton of
I've got
thought and
some
time put into it. It
priorities.
feels like,
Something to keep me
and
occupied.
there were some things that like that were callbacks to like different games. Like there's a blasphemous helmet you'll see that's really seems like it's inspired, but it's all done lovingly and doesn't seem like it's done maliciously or like cheaply, if that makes sense. So the world design in this game was hands down one of my favorite things. I remember, I think one of the things that hooked me on the first Dark Souls was how interconnected the worlds were, and like you'd find little nooks and crannies that you'd think might be a dead end, and then it'd lead to some new area that was like vast and would open up, and there's diverse biomes and um, open areas and tight areas, claustrophobic areas. Um, you feel a lot of that here. It definitely feels inspired by like that Dark Souls 1 era and game in particular. A lot of things here felt lived in, but like in a past era. You feel like, there's some cataclysm and everyone's gone now, but this used to be like a bustling area or something. The worlds are so well designed that it even makes backtracking sometimes fun. I'm sure, like in some of these games, you've seen areas like that before, where you may play through and there'll be like a door you can't get in or something, and then eventually you'll find a key and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, that door," and you'll run back there and find some item. Or it was like fun even backtracking to areas and when I get some item or key that would allow me to access something and like seeing where it work or what I could find. And it seemed like everywhere I looked there was like a new area or item to find or something hidden. I'd lift my lamp and find a whole area I didn't know I could get into or stuff like that. Things like that are like what keep me interested in games like this. Just exploring and finding everything. And the Umbra level design was fun and a lot better than I expected. I almost thought it was going to be like a gimmick or just like a throw in to be like, hey, look, we're not Dark Souls. But it gave the game its own personality, and there was such a difference between Axiom and Umbral that like each had its own different personality. It felt like when I was in Umbral, everything was tense and fast paced, and I'd be like running and trying to find an exit and being swarmed by enemies. And then when I get back to Axiom, which is like the regular world in the game, like you feel like you had more time to explore and check things out and look at the scenery. And it really, I thought, made areas and level design even more interesting than they already were. Like even if there was no Umbral, I would have enjoyed this game quite a bit. But like adding in that extra layer of like exploration and especially the push and pull between like going in and out, and like you kind of dread going in sometimes because like you're like you're going to be in for a fight, or you'd see some really tough enemy that was in Umbral. You'd lift your lamp up, you'd be in the regular world and you'd have killed every enemy and you're almost out of health, and you're like checking like, I don't know, is there a hidden item around here in Umbral? And you'd lift your lamp and then some enemy would see you and they'd like yank you into Umbral, and then you'd be in the panicked area with enemies everywhere spawning and chasing you, and all of a sudden it's hectic again. And there was this fun push and pull that worked between them that felt like really organic. And I gotta say, I was really impressed. And it was like the thing when I was watching a lot of the trailers and things leading up to the game that I probably cared the least about. As far as like combat, it's pretty deep. You can approach it kind of however you want, like dealing with enemies defensively. You can dodge, you can parry, or you can just use a shield and tank hits, which you will take wither damage when you do that, which is kind of like the Bloodborne rally mechanic, where your health bar will fill up with like kind of like a white cover over the red health, and when that fills up with white, like if you take a hit, without your shield or blocking, then you'll lose all that white health. And if you hit an enemy before you're hit while not guarding, you'll recover some of that health, and you can recover up to all of it. So you could block and then take like 20% white withered health, and then hit them back several times. And if you did it right, you wouldn't take any damage at all. But it made it strategic and fun. Liza P was released like right before this game, and it and Sekiro, I remember both like kind of had a way they wanted you to play. Like Sekiro wanted you to learn to deflect, and I feel like I struggled with that game so much until I finally like gave in and started trying to deflect everything. Like I tried to play my own way and dodge and stuff. And, I could get through areas, but it just struggled. And then same thing with Liza P. Like they had a dodge, but it didn't have a lot of iframes, and it was kind of slow. But then, like once I learned how to perfect block things and go through that system the way they wanted, like it made more sense. But what's cool about this game is you can really kind of approach it. They give you multiple ways through combat. So, like I said, you can dodge or parry or just block or, however you want to do it. So I thought the amount of freedom it offered was really fun. And not only did they like allow you multiple systems of engaging enemies, but they all felt really good. Like the dodge felt really good. I mean, not quite as good. I don't think anything ever feels as good as FromSoft games, but maybe the closest yet I've experienced. And the parry window was really nice. It was easy to hit consistently, and then the rally mechanic reminded me of Bloodborne, so it was all fun. And not only do you have freedom in combat, but you've got an immense amount of weapons and armor sets, rivaling anything I've ever seen, probably even as much as Elden Ring. I'd like to see a comparison, but it seems like it's every bit as big as, the amount of weapons and things that are in Elden Ring. You don't have as much difference between the items, like you don't have Ashes of War, um, like you did in Elden Ring, where there were specific special moves you could do and things like that. So, all small hammers work the same as other small hammers, but one might have bleed or poison or umbral damage, wither damage, where you could do it to the enemy, things like that. So there was a ton of variety and a ton of weapons, but there weren't like any huge, massive, like crazy weapons that had some move. It was like a special move or anything like that. It was just more standard, but you had a lot to choose from. And the armor sets were mostly all like really good looking, had a lot more of a medieval, like menacing look to them. I remember like with Elden Ring, I was kind of disappointed. Like all the armor sets in it were like goofy, like where you're wearing like a fungus thing on your head, or you're putting like a what were those guys, the Albanarks, and you had like a little frog guy looking head on, or goofy stuff like that. Where the armor here like all looks like super cool, um, like a gnarly medieval warrior type setting. You know what I mean? So I really loved all the armor, and then you had tanks too, which were cool because you could color all your armor with like a different color palette, or you could individually color like each armor piece however you want. So it made like unlimited options where you can mix and match like armor sets, and then mix and match colors, and um, yeah, this was a lot of fun. Like always experimenting with armor sets and things like that. And then you had your normal, like, buffs, and you had salts, which were kind of like grease. You put on a weapon, buff a weapon with fire, or, you go fight an enemy that did fire damage, and you could put fire, fire ward on, and so you don't take as much fire damage, or, poison on your weapon, or whatever. There was just a lot of stuff like that, and it all felt useful. It didn't feel like in some games where it's like you could just play through and ignore it. You could ignore it, but it was all useful, and if you use it, it would make things easier to get through sometimes, and it was all useful. Is what I'm trying to say. Also, the throwables. And like ranged weapons, you had magic you could do, and then also you could, use a bow or a crossbow, or you could just equip like throwing weapons. You can even equip like a javelin, or you can equip like throwing hatchets. There's a ton of throwable weapons, like, and they're actually viable. Like you could do a build just that purely does throwable weapons, and like I think it through the game pretty well. They actually buffed some of them. I worked ahead in one of the early areas and bought this key, and like went on to a later game area and defeated this boss that I probably shouldn't have been able to after like a million tries. And it was the Sacred Resonator, like whenever you see him. So, and then right after him was enhanced throwing hatchet, which you get the throwing hatchet like right around that spot in the game, and then the enhanced throwing hatchet is like a late game thing. But I got it like real early before I even got to Forsaken Finn, and then like for the rest of the game I had it. And anytime I was like struggling with an enemy, I'd just whip out the enhanced throwing hatchets. And they were doing like like 500-600 damage. So the throwables are really a lot of fun and really useful. The story in these types of games is usually pretty thin. Um, sometimes you'll get some surface level stuff like motivations and where you need to go and who's what faction and things like that. You do get a lot more here. I'd say kind of equivalent maybe to like Sekiro, if you've played that. Like you'll get some cutscenes and things and stuff through dialogue that kind of give you the who, what, where, when, how, and that type of information. And then, if you want to learn more, you got the standard like where you can read item descriptions and things like that. It seems like they did a really good job of creating their own world and lore. Um, there's a lot of mysteries and things you want to learn about. And really, the only way you can do it is like through reading item descriptions and stuff. And some of the items you got had like a basic description, but as you leveled up certain stats, like Radiance and Inferno, you would, which are like the kind of spiritual or magic stats, you would learn more and get like a deeper description. So, and those were the ones that were like tied to the different factions, like the Radiant and Inferno, which are like the good and bad, well, surface level good and bad factions in the game. So it was really interesting. I'd never seen a game do that before, and I just thought it was interesting going back later and checking item descriptions and learning more and trying to find out all I could. All right, and now I got to get into the performance, which I think was the most controversial part of this game. I still don't understand a lot of the reviews and hate for it, but the performance was less than great when the game first came out. Um, I put together like a way I'm going to score these games when I do these reviews and do it a little more scientifically. And it's going to be like a 1 through 10 in certain aspects, and I'm going to weight like performance heavier and gameplay heavier, and a couple categories heavier. But anyways, I was thinking about the performance, and when the game first came out, I would probably give it like a 6. It wasn't great. The frame rate was all over the place. It would stutter, it would chug in certain areas, and it'd be pretty good in certain times. And then you would get a lot of artifacts, and there was a weird thing where HDR, I think it still kind of seems that way for me. If you turn HDR off, you actually get a lot better performance. This is on PS5, and I've seen other people on PS5 that don't look like their gameplay is this good. And I did see someone online saying turn off HDR, and I was like, yeah, whatever. I tried it. It's a huge improvement. So I was kind of shocked at that. Just little things, but they have patched the game 15 times to come out, which is kind of unheard of, and it's been like 3 weeks. So that is impressive. It's gotten better every time, so I will say that. And it seems like the developers have done all they can to make it good, and now it's mostly good. Okay, so I do want to stress this is before, I think this is maybe after like the first patch, maybe like a day or two after release. but this is showcasing some of the footage of how it was, and then I'll show you some footage of like how it's running now, which is like way smoother. This is like some of the worst I encountered right here, my entire playthrough, and this is really bad. So this is again where I'd probably give it about a 6. It was almost unplayable in these parts. And again, they've done a great job of patching this. This is before I figured out the HDR trick. When I figured that out, you'll actually there's a video on my channel talking about it, telling people. You can see that was like there had only been a few patches at that point. That's probably 2 weeks ago. You've been out about I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 days a week at that point. Um, but I figured that out, and then it started running smoother. But this is even before that. And then, like I said, they've patched it several times since then, so it's even better from that. So it's vastly improved. I just wanted to show how it was on launch because I'm going to give two separate ratings here. I'm going to rate it as, as it was at the start and as it is now, just to be totally fair. Now, this is current gameplay. I just recorded this. And you can see this is like another kind of one-on-one fight with the elite enemy, and you can just see like how much easier it is for me to like see their moves coming and dodge and parry and move around them. Not that I'm great or anything, but before it was like almost unmanageable trying to deal with some of the fights. And to be fair, it wasn't bad everywhere. There were a couple areas that were the worst. The snowy area, and then there's an area with ash that's falling. They were the worst. But yeah, so that's pretty much a moot point now. The game's running actually pretty good. I would say compared to most games, it probably runs on the better side. There, you might get. I still notice every now and then I'll get like a little hitch in the frame rate where there'll be like one, a tenth of a second where it'll slow down a little bit. You know what I mean? And it's present in these videos. If you don't notice it, you probably won't even catch it. But um, that's just kind of nitpicking it for review and being hyper aware since it was a problem early on. But again, for most games, it runs really smooth now. And graphically, it's an amazing looking game. It's one of the better looking um, games I've played. And I mean, like the detail's pretty amazing when you get down and start looking at stuff and stuff up close. I mean, and a lot of the effects and things. So I wasn't shocked that they had some issues with performance early on and getting it optimized, especially since it's on all platforms and it's a port. So yeah, I would still recommend if you're going to play though, and you start running into issues, maybe try turning off HDR. I don't know why it took my performance and like how well the game played for me from like a I don't know, like a 6 to like an 8. I mean, it was a huge, or a 9. It's a big difference. And then, they've had all their patches in there too that made a big difference. And you still probably need to play in performance at this point. Um, Quality is still a little too slideshowy for me. I mean, it may be good for you. It does look amazing, for taking screenshots and stuff. And it does have the feature where you can pause and take 3D photos and spin your character around and so that is really cool. Yeah, but overall performance is not an issue anymore. I just wanted to caveat that and let you know it was an issue up front, but I would not let it affect, you know, at this point, whether that's going to let you, be a factor in you playing the game or not. I think, if anything, the performance is pretty good now. So shout out to the developer though for staying on it. I mean, most of these companies now release a game and then they patch it once or twice, but they've put out 15 patches now in 3 weeks, and I can count. I think three times I remember there were patches in back-to-back days where they did something and the community didn't like it, and they got feedback and went back and fixed it the next day. So you can't ask for more than that out of a developer, and I really want to support developers and push their product when they're doing that because so many games you play, they don't give a shit about their consumers. So anyway, shout out to the developers for that, and yeah. I'm consistently amazed every time I do one of these things how long they end up. I don't know how people do these like 5, 10 minute reviews and get out everything they want to say. I guess maybe if they write a script, it could probably truncate it, and maybe I'll do that going forward. But I had a lot I wanted to say with this game because I felt like it was getting no respect. And honestly, this is the most fun I've had with any game since Elden Ring. I know that sounds like hyperbole, but it really was that fun for me, and it lived up to pretty much every expectation I had. There were a couple other little things I wanted to mention. Some of the quest lines did break on playthroughs where I would do things out of order, which I think were technically my fault, but there wasn't a lot of direction. So I think there could be a little more direction, like as far as like the side quests and stuff. And the performance issues I have mentioned. I'm trying to think what else. I would have liked some special moves. The co-op still is not perfect, needs a little work. But the PvE for me is the big thing. But overall, like this game's awesome. I love it. If it had FromSoft on it, I could see this game getting all the respect in the world. But it feels like because it's not, no one's giving it any love. But for me, yeah, it deserves it, and I had a blast. Cannot recommend it enough if you enjoy Souls likes or action or RPGs. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.